important that we have this openness in our relationships with one another. Well, the third one's kind of similar. We would say, dare to talk about your affections. It's connected with this other one, isn't it? To be transparent and to dare to talk about your affections. Now, I should probably say this is probably more true of men than of women. You find women in their friendships very open usually, very more close to sharing their affections with one another. But there's something about us guys that this is a little bit more of a roadblock for doing this. Again, like the tough guy image, not wanting to be embarrassed. But those who love widely, they often throw caution to the wind, and they declare their love freely. They're not reluctant to say how much they care about a person. You know, Jesus did that with his disciples. He told them how much he loved them. He was not a man afraid to cry in front of people. He was moved with compassion. I tell you what, you got your Bibles? Turn with me to 2 Corinthians chapter 2. Let me look at this one. The Apostle Paul. He was also one not afraid to show feelings, emotion. So this is from 2 Corinthians chapter 2. I'll just start in verse 3. 2 Corinthians chapter 2, starting in verse 3. I wrote this same unto you, lest when I came I should have sorrow from them of whom I ought to rejoice, having confidence in you all that my joy is the joy of you all. Now, Paul had written to them, and he had laid it on the line for some of the things that they were doing wrong. That's a good mark of a good friend. I'll tell you things that you're doing wrong. But then he opens up to them, and he says the reason why he did this. He says, verse 4, for out of much affliction and anguish of heart, I wrote unto you with many tears. Not that ye should be grieved, but that ye might know the love which I have more abundantly unto you. Now, when you read that, when you read what Paul is saying, the sentiments that he's laying on the page, do you feel repulsed? Or do you feel drawn closer to this man? Of course, we have much admiration and a desire to be closer to somebody who is like the Apostle Paul. So let's be like the Apostle Paul, not afraid to show our true feelings, not afraid to express that we love somebody else. So, again, there are stipulations on that, right? We want to be careful. There's some people who are I call them gushers. Like every word is these emotions, these things, these aspirations of love and those kind of things, but that's almost too much. So there is, again, some stipulations to this and our balance of how we do these things. So don't be just this dry well, but don't overcome somebody. Don't be a ramrod where you're pressurizing somebody to express their emotions. That's not good either. These things have to come out naturally. And there's people who are like pressurizers. Well, they'll say it because they want to hear it back. And we can't be that way either, right? So perhaps, the word I love you, it might seem too inappropriate. We're building up to these things, but you can often say other things like, I missed you. I wish you'd been at a certain place at a certain time. That can mean a lot to somebody. Just the different ways that we express ourselves. So that's rule number 3. Now, rule number 4 is to learn the gestures of love. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe in love at first sight? You do? A believer. I don't know if I believe it. I don't know if when we're talking, I believe in lust at first sight. Yeah? But how can you love a person if you don't know a person? Yes. So the best relationships are ones that are built over time. It's those little kindnesses each day that act like compound interest. You know what I mean by compound interest? A little financial lesson. I like to use this, so maybe I should explain a little bit. Love is like this. It's like compound interest. So, I don't know if you can see this up here, but you didn't know you were going to get a math lesson today, did you? Oh boy. Compound interest works this way. If you're going to invest some money, you're going to get a certain interest on that investment. It's going to come back to you. All right, free money, right? You just give them the money and it comes back to you. And let's say you get a 20% return. Now, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, but love is like that. Love has a high rate of return, right? So if you invested $1, you would get an interest of 20 cents. That's 20% on your dollar. And you'd get back, you'd have $1.20. Now, say you're doing compound interest. What you do is you take that interest, you got that 20 cents. You put that 20 cents back in, you put in another $1 with that $1.20 that you already have. You'll get 44 cents then the next time it comes around and matures. Well, that got 44 cents. Now you have $2.64. Now you take that, you turn that around, put in another $1 with that interest. Now you're getting 73% on your investment. And you see how this goes up and up and up. And the time that you've done this 10 times, you've invested 10 times just $1. At the end of that investment, you got $24.96. You got $25. You can go have a nice lunch. That's what compound interest is. Because as you're putting in this investment, it's giving you a return. And that's what love is. Love is exactly like compound interest. And if you do that year by year by year, you're going to accumulate a savings in your bank account so that when you screw up and you do something wrong and you have to take a withdrawal, you still got something in the bank. You still got something in that relationship, right? So experts realize that when it comes to love, emotions, they kind of ebb and they kind of go. Like the way that you feel about somebody is not like this constant. It's not like constant this way. It's more like, hopefully it's more like this way. You're up and down. The overall trend is more and more, but it ebbs and wanes. So there's usually in a relationship with somebody, you're not going to feel the same way about that person you did maybe at other times. But you realize that the love of God and our love is not based upon emotions. It's not based solely on feelings. It's about choices that we make. It's about commitments that we make. So this is when the acts of love become important. It's these little acts of kindness that demonstrate that you're not taking your friend or your partner in life for granted. You're taking time out of your busy schedule for having lunch together. You're giving a small gift, maybe a bookmark. Or you're leaving little love notes around if it's a romantic interest, but maybe it's just putting the cap back on the toothpaste. I don't know. It's just these little things that constant that really add up. And rituals can be a big part of that. We talk about taking time out for these things. So It's really just spending time with one another, whether that's a lunch together, going golfing, or just arranging to do Bible study together. So it's no mistake that one of the commandments of our Lord is that we make sure that we meet every week. That we meet every week around the table of remembrance, breaking bread together. And it's a fellowship meal, isn't it? It's meant to represent a meal, and that's having a meal together is a huge thing. When we eat together, it's really, it changes. It makes friends out of enemies. You know, another thing is helping a friend do a task, working together. I call this side-by-side time, right? Where you're working together on something. In this ecclesia, you're going to have a lot of opportunity to do that as you move to a different hall location and working together. Just in the physical aspects of a building, it's surprising how close you draw together as an ecclesial family when you're working side by side. So if your friend is doing some sort of unpleasant task, man, it'd be really nice if you just offer, can I help you with that? Man, that would be huge. So it's just taking some of those times and just seeing these sort of opportunities to work side by side. You know, if you're married or if you plan to get married, that's another thing. Like we have this kind of separation sometimes in chores. The wife does the dishes, the husband takes out the garbage, right? But what if we did the dishes together, side by side? What if we did the garbage together, side by side? So it's just looking for whatever opportunity is, right? These are the gestures of love, because love is something you do. Love is something you do. All right, here's number 5. This is the last one for today. Number 5 is make sure you create space in your relationships. Because when you have a true friend, the true friend is more interested in you than in themselves. And they want to see you expand. They want to see you grow. They're not going to manipulate you or dominate you or judge you. So it's another one of those kind of strange things, right? We desire this closeness and friendships and those kind of things, but we also desire an amount of freedom in our relationships. And some relationships really break down when somebody takes on the role of a manipulator. Like it's got to be their way or no way. And we become maybe a take charge manipulator in a relationship. This is not creating space in a relationship. This is really restricting it. So, ask yourself these questions in your relationships. Do we usually end up going to the restaurant or movie I prefer? Do you enjoy correcting factual errors in other people's conversations? Do you use humor to put down your friends? Or do you have to know more about a topic than others to feel comfortable discussing it? So this is what we would call somebody who's doing things like this, a manipulator in the relationship. It's not positive. It's not helping to build up our friendships. So they're not healthy. Any lasting relationship in our friendship is going to have a certain amount of freedom, a certain amount of space behind it. That's not going to get us upset or jealous. It's going to actually give us some joy when these things happen. So here's another list for you. 6 ways for creating some of this space. I would say be cautious with criticism. Some people feel like they have to be superior, and it really comes off in criticizing a lot, in judging a lot. We talked about how these manipulators like to correct with factual errors. I've had friends who seemed like everything I said, they said, "Oh yeah, but really it's like this." And it's not it's not very helpful, is it? So if we have that tendency to criticize, we really ought to bite our tongue more often than not. And work on, rather, encouragement. Because what's the opposite of criticism? It's encouragement. It's not nagging or a person, but finding positive ways to help people. We need to employ the language of acceptance. If we can learn to accept the integrity of a person before us, our relationships will be greatly enhanced. Now, it doesn't mean we approve of everything. Of course, that's not a true friend. A true friend will help us. They will have times when we might need to criticize, but that's not everything. But there are times where we might find it hard to accept what a friend is saying or doing. But there's a difference between acceptance and approval. They're different. And listening is one of the greatest tools we can use without approving or disproving what we are being told. To kind of wisely listen and to ask questions before we get to some sort of advice for our friend. Just really tell me more about this. This seems important to you. How are you feeling about this? Do you think that's really the best ways? There are other ways maybe you should be thinking about this or doing different things. And part of that acceptance is really encouraging your friends to be unique. Your friend can have different likes than you do. And that should be encouraged. That should be really something that you should treasure in a relationship. Is maybe they're better at music than you are. You don't really enjoy music, but you encourage that in the other person. It's not that you have to conform in your friendships to be the exact same person, right? But when you're enjoying each other's differences, that's so much better, and sharing in that diversity. But we also need times to allow for solitude. A non-possessive friend will have a respect for the time that their friend needs some privacy. There is such a thing as too much closeness, which can stifle the relationship, and depends on the type of person that the person is, whether extrovert, introvert, but it's understanding the needs of your friend in a relationship and realizing that these times of solitude or apartness are not detrimental to the friendship. It's a mark of a mature friendship where you can relax and you can chill when somebody else is moving away from you a little bit, and expecting that will come back in time as you continue to grow in other ways. So really, sometimes we get jealous of our friendships and those kind of things, but we need to encourage other relationships. Jealousy and possessiveness, they're like acid in any sort of companionship. You never have any exclusive rights to anybody, really. So you got to expect that other people matter to your friends. Not everybody is going to make you 100% happy all the time. And I think this is really important in ecclesial life, because as young people, we tend to get these cliques, right? There's this group of people here, a group of people here, group of people here. We're not gelled together. But we're not this, when they have those cliques, we're really separate, aren't we? But if we can bring those bubbles of friendships together where they overlap, there's other people having friendships with others, and they overlap, we create one whole, as it were, together. So let's be very, very careful about the groups, the cliques that we develop, and making sure that our friendships are overlapping and we're encouraging relationships and friendships with others outside of our normal natural circles. And then finally, here's the sixth way: be ready for shifts in your relationship. You guys got to realize that, especially at this age, friends you have now are not going to be friends later. As sad as it is, and if you're in high school, you're going to have certain friends in school that are not going to be your friends when you go to university. You're going to drift away from each other, especially if they're friends that you've developed in the world, and then you come and you're baptized and you become more spiritual. You're naturally, in that sense, going to drift away from people like that. And I hope that isn't the case, that you would have a spiritual influence on those friends. But when I look back on my life, there are so many friends that I had that I thought were close that we just naturally drifted away because we matured and we grew. And these things happen. We have to realize that these things happen in our relationships. And then we come into contact with other people, and we mold and we grow with them. So we have to be ready for these shifts in our relationships, and especially as teenagers, as you go from high school to university or college, as you get married, as you have kids, as you get older. These things are going to shift through time. Okay, so there's our five ways to make friends. I'd like you guys to think about that. The first one was assign top priority to your relationships. The second one is to cultivate transparency, to open yourself up. The third one was dare to talk about your affection. The fourth one is to learn the gestures of love. Love is something you do. And the fifth is to create space in your relationships. So, if you wrote those down, think about those five. And then in our next class, we're going to talk about another five and how we can make these submarine friends go even deeper, and how we can keep friends. 5 ways to keep friends. All right?
Everyone, I'm sure we all enjoyed class 1, and it was so much good food for thought, knowing that friends is so much more than just like a follower on social media, but it's about those deeper and intimate relationships that you make with one another. So we'll take a 10-minute break or so. We'll probably try and reconvene at about 11:15, and yeah, looking forward to class 2.